All right, hello and welcome to the Around the SBSL podcast. We have Kylo Ren here, myself, and Shanks. We're going to be going over some of the past 2 weeks, some of the statistics, some of the things we've seen from players, from owners, and whatnot. So let's start us off with week one. Shanks, who was your standout owner in week one?
So I think week one, uh, and it kind of carries into week two. I think Swing, Eat More Chicken is a tough opponent. I played him week two. Swing, gets a late game big play, takes it to the house and gets the win there, and then starts to build momentum going into week two. So I think Swing, I think has traditionally been a guy where. Um, we talk about it being a sim league. I think Swing is a guy who in previous seasons, uh, that sim gameplay, I think has kind of hurt him.
Mm-hmm.
Not in a sense that that's not what he needs to be doing, but I think that Swing does such a good job of mixing it up and doing different things that um, he hasn't always really found something to go to.
Mm-hmm. Hasn't found his
And
identity.
yeah, and I think that this year, the way that Breida's running the ball, he's throwing the ball well, he's taking shots over the top. That defense um, is looking good in the sense that he's given up a lot of points in the first 2 weeks, but it's bend or don't break.
Right.
And I think he's done just enough with the way that his offense is humming that if he keeps it up, he's going to be really hard to beat down the road.
Definitely, and if I'm looking at the Buccaneers game now, and Matt Breida had 12 attempts, 134 yards, and a touchdown, which is pretty insane. He did have a long run of 75 yards, but I mean that's pretty good numbers. Jimmy Garoppolo was 15 for 19, 267 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. But I mean he only had 4 incompletions, so it's not terrible with 118.7 QBR. His defense, as they're pretty good with the sacks, 4 sacks. Um, but yeah, like you said, they are allowing a lot of points. But if his offense can keep it up, keep the run game going, I mean, 145 yards of rushing in week one. And then if we go back here to last week, I'm pretty sure he had a lot against the Bengals. Let's see, that was 45-42. Yeah, well, he only had 81 rushing yards against the Bengals. But I think overall, he's just really trying to emphasize getting the run game going. I think in this Madden, especially, if you get the run game going, it's pretty hard to stop you.
I think the run game is more consistent this year in the sense that if you stay committed and you stay patient with your run game, a lot of it's going to end up working in your favor because, like my week one game against Soden, I think midway through the third quarter, McCaffrey has 10 rushes for 12 yards or something.
Yeah,
But if you stay patient, you stay committed, he eventually pops one, and
and
it
then
completely
yeah,
flips field position.
then it flips momentum
Um,
for your running game too. It
right, and
seems like after
then
that you're good to
I th-
go.
your run game's not working, play action isn't as effective. All it really takes on this year's Madden is to break one, and it really does open up your offense a lot more. And I think that's one of the more true to life things that this Madden has going for it.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm looking at your game now against Soden, and that was a everybody knows that was a fucking good game for the most part. I mean, you held Soden for the 13 points, who's always been really good on offense, and you scored 31 points against Soden's defense with J.J. Watt and Aaron Donald, and probably the best defense that I've seen Soden have in a Madden. So that was pretty impressive on your part. Cam Newton 14 for 20, 198 yards and 2 touchdowns. But I think the really big tell here is one, the Jared Goff interception, and two, the fact that Todd Gurley was held to 46 yards, whereas McCaffrey was able to get 74 yards with only 5 more attempts. So
So this is
yeah,
something that me and Soden talked about, and you saw it a lot in his game last night against CP.
hmm
The answer to beating Soden this year is going to be you need quick developing passing concepts.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to run a lot of play action. You're not going to be able to take a lot of shots downfield because if you sit, Aaron Donald and J.J. Watt are going to live in your backfield.
Yeah.
I
Definitely.
think the big thing for me in that game, Soden gets a sack on my first offensive possession and doesn't get another one for the rest of the game. Uh,
Because then you
but I,
adjusted, but
yeah, and
yeah.
that's the thing. You have to be willing to take what the defense gives you when someone has a defensive line like Soden does.
Hmm.
Because if you wait for that second or third option to come open, you're going to get sacked. Dump it
Yeah.
down, get it to your playmakers in space, and see what kind of plays they can make you. Because if you wait, he's got two X factor defensive linemen who it only takes two sacks to get one of them in the zone. And I think last night against CP, at one point he had both of them in their X factor. You're
Yeah.
just not going to be able to block those guys.
Yeah. And you're gonna have to dump the ball off quick, and the way man coverage is in this game, it's pretty hard to dump the ball off quick sometimes. So you're gonna have creative, quick pass offense, or at least get the running game going to stop some of that pass rush. So I think I've always stressed that in my forced fumble videos. Take what defense is giving you, safe throws, run the ball. That's just kind of football concept, though, and I'm glad it kind of is more emphasized in this Madden so far.
I agree. I agree.
All right.
Looking at yours, though, man,
Yep.
you're blessed is one of the, as long as I've been around this league, you're blessed has always been one of those kind of top tier guys. He throws the ball extremely well. He usually has super effective passing concepts. He's never really been a rushing guy, but I think a lot of us expected when he was able, when the Chiefs drop to him and he takes them, you give him Patrick Mahomes, you give him Tyreek Hill, you give him Travis Kelce. I think a lot of us expected some really big numbers, and not to say that he doesn't eventually put them up, but you held him to 7 points, 216 passing yards, got to him 11 times. Um, 18 to 25, that's not a bad clip. Mahomes was 72% on his completions, but you start talking about that 11 sack number, and inherently those interception numbers are going to go up because now he's rushing decisions.
Hmm.
He's throwing before he's ready. He's throwing before receivers make their breaks. So, I mean, man, I think that whatever you were doing defensively obviously worked.
So one thing I have noticed in this Madden that I'll share with people is you have to be aggressive on defense, especially when someone's trying to pass the ball a lot. You don't want to have them sit back and have a lot of time. And good defensive lines is pretty key to that. And I think I have that right now with Josh Allen and Calais Campbell and uh, Tevion Bryan, which I upgraded to superstar dev. So my defensive line is pretty stout, but you also got to throw in blitzes in there even with that defensive line. A lot of blitzes is gonna throw your other team's passing game off tremendously, and you kind of saw that in the Chiefs game. Um, and the other thing is, again, just run the ball. I mean, you saw you're blessed. I mean, that's kind of his game is to not run the ball a lot. He ran the ball 4 times, but I ran the ball 28 times, and I had split carries with Alfred Blue, who went 14 attempts, 102 yards, and a touchdown. And Leonard Fournette, 13 attempts, 73 yards, but he had an injury in that game, so he was out. But Alfred Blue kind of took the load still. And Alfred Blue isn't anything special, so even if you don't have a special running back, you have a decent enough O line, just run the ball. I can't
Right.
stress that enough in this Madden. If you can run the ball, you're going to be that much more successful, and you're going to find yourself in better situations.
I agree. As we move on to week 2, though, there's an owner I want to talk about, man, and I know that he's a buddy of yours. Redskins for life. The Eagles, statistically looking at him, are one of the better rosters on the game. He had no issues with them week 1. He turns around, he gets Colids coming to town week 2. And we all saw what Colids was able to do with Ezekiel Elliott week 1.
Hmm.
He holds him to 18 attempts and 57 yards with a long of 19. You take that
Hmm.
19-yard carry off. He's got 38 yards rushing with Ezekiel Elliott.
Yep.
You turn the tables, though, 5 attempts with Geis for 50, 7 attempts with Adrian Peterson for 50. Looks like you got Chris Thompson involved a little bit. The big thing for him, though, you look at those statistics, and it's something I noticed in another game I watched him play last night in another league. We talk about running to set up the passing game, man, and he does a phenomenal job of it. He's
Hmm.
very run first. He's got two really good backs. He's got Bryce Love that I'm sure will slide in next year once Adrian Peterson probably retires or gets let go. He's got 123 rushing yards. He had 50 yards with two backs. He only threw the ball 13 times, but you have Paul Richardson 3 for 73, Josh Doxson 3 for 47. Got McLaurin, Davis, Peterson, and Jordan Reed all involved with a catch each. So he's able to run, and you're having to become conscious of his run game because everybody he's played so far has struggled to stop it. And then he's got just enough speed on the outside that he can take a play action shot. And your user's probably coming down. And like I said, there's enough speed between Richardson, Dox, and McLaurin that if you come down and come out of the middle of the field, those guys have every chance to take that one to the house.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And you talk about running first as setting up the passing game, and that's kind of why I'm not saying don't pass the ball. Passing the ball is fun. I'm not that good at it, but you know, you look at the impact it has. Alex Smith going 10 for 13, 144 yards and a touchdown. That's a pretty perfect game for a quarterback right there. So you just talk about setting up the run. Yeah, he split the carries really nicely here and had 100 yards between two people with less than 10 carries each. So
I think that's going to be crucial for him, though, because you have Geis, who's been injury prone in the past. You have Adrian Peterson, who's older and up in age. So I think if he can continue to limit their workloads and he avoids injury that way and can keep both those guys healthy for a 16-game season, he's going to be really hard to stop. One of the things you touched on, though, he has Alex Smith. Alex Smith is kind of, you know, later in his career. He's coming off an injury as well. You put him kind of in that game manager role, and as long as you're able to run the ball, your expectations of him don't have to be too terribly high.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine this is Alex Smith's probably last year before he turns over the reins to Haskins. But I mean, he's getting everything he needs to get out of Alex Smith.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right, let's move on to another game in week 2. See if I can find it right here. I'll pull it up for you. So I was actually, what was it? It was the Your Bless kind of came back from his week 1 beating, and I don't want to call it a beating, but you know, he came back from his week 1 game and scored 35 points. This time, he went back and he passed the ball, you know, extremely more efficiently. This time, 368 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. He only allowed 2 sacks this time, so he's getting the ball out better. His rushing yards, he actually started to rush the ball this time. 10 rushing attempts with Smith for 45 yards and a touchdown. Not great, but you know, again, at least just that alone will set up the pass for you if you let it. So that was impressive there, and he got all of his receivers involved. Tyreek Hill, 4 receptions, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns with an 88-yard long reception. Mecole Hardman was also involved with a touchdown, a long one, 29 yards. Sammy Watkins, Travis Kelce. So, you know, he's becoming a little bit more, you know, multi-dimensional in this game, it seemed. And the Raiders didn't really have an answer for the passing game except for those 2 interceptions.
I think this year, maybe more so than any, if your team that you got in Soden isn't a team that you play with a lot, there's always that kind of adjustment period. You're trying to figure out what works, what players on your team are kind of in your future plans, what players maybe fall to the back burner. So I think maybe what happened with Your Blessed, maybe that first week, you know, is just kind of getting into it and seeing what works. But I think week 2 is probably more indicative of what he's capable of on a weekly basis.
Yeah. Definitely.
And I think the longer that he has to play with those guys and get comfortable with those guys and what they can do within that playbook, I think he's a guy that once we do this show towards the end of the year is going to have himself in prime playoff position.
Definitely. And I want to move on to one more week 2 matchup, the Chargers versus the Lions. Was a pretty close game, 28-14, but holy crap, was there a standout in this game, and that was Joey Bosa with 7 sacks, and I think that's the record, if I'm correct. I could be wrong there. It could be tied for the record for single game sacks, but 7 sacks is insane. And we go back to the pass rush and how important that is to get that going. Joey Bosa with 7 sacks is exactly what you want, obviously. So shout out to the Chargers for really getting him going. They also were pretty good with the passing game. Keenan Allen went off. 6 receptions, 184 yards, 2 touchdowns, and Philip Rivers was nearly perfect with 13 for 17, 278 yards, and 3 touchdowns with the perfect QBR. So 8 sacks total for the Chargers. That kind of set the tone for the Lions. And Matthew Stafford was kind of rushing some throws. He wasn't as accurate in the running game. It was going, but, when you get down a little bit, you have to start passing the ball. So, so Joey Bosa was really tremendous in that game. And I think he actually leads the league in sacks right now. I mean, I guess how could you not? But, he has 10 sacks this year already. So that's insane.
So I'll talk about that one a little bit. So the Lions, I think we can all agree. I think Smurf is a Lions fan. And that's probably about the only way that you're excited about being at the back of the draft and this team falling to you.
Yeah.
But that's a talent-devoid roster. The Chargers, I think we can all agree, is probably a top 5 or 6 roster in the league.
Yeah.
And you look, it's a 2-score game, but the difference in those 2 scores are the 2 Matthew Stafford interceptions. He did the things that you would typically look at and think, man, that had to have limited the pass rush. He went for almost 100 yards with Kerryon Johnson. He's spreading the ball around to a handful of different receivers. But you look at it, and there's 2 large discrepancies. There's the 2 turnovers from Matthew Stafford, and Joey Bosa, I'm going to go out on a limb and say got in his X factor.
Yeah.
And the Chargers ultimately end up with 8 sacks. The Lions are only able to generate 2. So there's a difference in the pass rush they're generating and the turnovers. But aside from that, man, I think Smurf did probably about all you could do in a matchup that's so lopsided in terms of roster talent.
Yeah.
I mean, to hang around. I think I remember watching part of this game, and I think at one point in the second half, he's only down 1 score.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Well, it's just the momentum in this game, and being able to generate sacks and running the ball is so important because it goes back to momentum. You can be down a touchdown. Like if you go to the Texan game, if anybody was watching that, I was down a touchdown and pretty much down a touchdown the whole game until like midway through the third quarter, where I kicked a field goal and nothing was really going too right for me on offense, and defensively they were holding them. But how long can that really last? And then I got a nice turnover, and then I just kind of kept getting turnovers and kind of spiraled down from there. Ended up scoring 38 unanswered points. So, momentum and getting sacks and these turnovers is so important in these games. All right.
I agree, and I think that teams who can generate a pass rush are inherently going to be more successful. Like I said, it's one of those more true-to-life kind of things. 7 sacks seems excessive, but at the end of the day, I mean, if you're not doing the things that you need to do to limit some of these elite pass rushers, that's the kind of issues you're going to run into.
Exactly. All right, moving on to Week 3. What is a matchup in Week 3 that you're excited to see?
So there were a couple just looking through it. I think that the Alert God, You're Blessed matchup has a chance to be really good.
Yep, the Ravens and Chiefs.
Yep, and then me and Hoyt are going to play later today, Panthers, Cardinals. You got Jay Wood versus You're Blessed. You got a commissioner showdown with Soden and his Rams against the Alpha and the Browns. I mean, there are a lot of good games on the slate today. I think another one that I'm kind of looking forward to actually is Cobra and Colids, and you think Miami and Dallas, and that doesn't scream to anybody, but you look at what Cobra was able to do last week.
Yeah, with that
he
team.
Gets a win against a really good user in your Momza with a significantly better team. It's another one of those kind of talent devoid matchups. So it's obvious from watching that game and that end result that Cobra, we talk about getting comfortable. He's obviously getting comfortable. He's doing some stuff that's working because he's putting guys who, aren't going to win any matchups ratings-wise, really, in positions to get open. He's got the run game going a little bit. So I think if Coolidge struggles to run the ball against him, he could very easily go to 2-1 on the season.
Yeah, definitely. And with that roster, that'd be pretty impressive. And you can go back to that Another big thing about this game is the trade, the blockbuster trade that they had with Rosen going to the Cowboys and Prescott going to the Dolphins. So it's going to be interesting to see how both of those quarterbacks perform on the new teams against their old teams. So that'll be an interesting matchup there. All right, so we're gonna have to cut this short here because I also have to go and play my game against the Titans. Should be a good one there in the South. So, all right, anything you would add, Shanks, before we go?
No, I think we're good, man. I think there are some good games this week. I think there's a chance for some guys to really, put their stamp on this league. Guys that maybe either drew teams that we didn't think were going to perform very well, or guys who, we didn't have a lot of experience watching in the previous cycle. So to those guys, man, keep doing what you're doing. And we hope to be talking about you still at the end of the season on one of these.
Yep, sounds good. All right. So until next time, guys. See you later.